Well, good evening. We are again grateful for another opportunity to study together. Seems like we've been away for a while now. We had a midweek service on last Wednesday,
Yeah.
which was a kickoff to our pastoral anniversary celebration on this past Sunday, and Dr. Richard Hughes shown up preached on last Wednesday.
Amen.
If you have not, if you did not get a chance to hear that live, that feed should still be on Facebook Live and our YouTube. But he showed up preached, and it was a great start to a very good week. And then on this past Sunday, it was the preaching was choice. At both services, Pastor John Clark, Hawkins, Taylor, he certainly preached in both services. The music was excellent. Our choir rendered music in the AM, and then Elder Mario Webb in New Covenant and choir brought the music on in the afternoon, and it was just a good day. Certainly, this family, this first family, include this pastor, we are just grateful to all. And so thank you all. Thank you, Cedar Top, for loving us the way that you do. Thank you to this community for the support. So many outside of Cedar Top, outside of this community, supported text messages. Many showed up. And so it was just a beautiful, beautiful celebration and a reminder of what God can do. Amen. When He's in control, and we allow Him to be in control. And so certainly we thank God for what He's doing at this in this place and in this season. We're going to pick back up Esther. We are in the 3rd chapter. We were able to get through the introduction, the first chapter and the 2nd chapter before we took a short hiatus, if you will. But we're going to pick up right there in Esther 3, right where we left off. Let me do this just to make sure we're all on the same page. Again, we've got those notes. Go back and look at those notes. Go back and read those chapters and look at those studies if you have to. But just kind of set the scene. Where are we at now? We're where? We're in Persia, right? Esther, the entire book of Esther, the setting is Persia. And if you recall, Persia, Babylon, the Babylonians would have come in and conquered the remaining portion of the Israel nation, right? Judah, the southern kingdom, and then we've studied the powers and how it goes. Persian, Greek. We studied all that, but we have the Babylonians who would have been conquered by the Persians, right? And then once the Persians conquered the Babylonians, Medo-Persians, then they would have absorbed those those Jews that were in captivity. And then recall, there's 70 years of captivity, and you already have a number of Jews that have gone back to Jerusalem, right? You get that. Ezra, Nehemiah, Zerubbabel, all those, if you recall those. And it's interesting, some consider the Jews that are in the diaspora or outside of Jerusalem who did not decide to go back, they consider them in disobedient. Yeah. That's interesting. That we understand, even if you look at the geography, where many Jews are at even today, you still see the footprint of many Jews who did not go back to Jerusalem after those 70 years. And so we get right here in Persia, we get a group of those who remained in the Persian kingdom. The Persian kingdom was a large kingdom, right? King Xerxes had a large province, if you will. First chapter talks about that. 127 provinces from India to Ethiopia. And so it's a vast area. And then you're going to have, of course, you have the Jews in Susa, in the capital, but then you have them throughout the province as well. And we'll even see that today in some of what happens as decrees go out and things of that sort. And so you have the king, King Xerxes, or Ahasuerus, is an interesting one. He's got some flaws, you all, and we talked about that. He brought his queen out, Vashti, right?
Yeah.
And he wanted to parade her, and she refused to come. That's going to be in that first chapter. They told his folks next to him, said, "Look, you don't need a woman like that.
Yeah.
You don't need a queen like that. She's going to influence all the women in the kingdom. And so you get something out so everybody understands that she will no longer be the queen, and that we'll be looking for a new queen." And he thinks that's a good idea, and he signs off on it. And so we've got Queen Vashti. Vashti is an interesting study. We don't know her lineage, but we see her take a stand. And I don't think we talk about that enough. We jump to Esther 4, and certainly Esther is one to be commended, but I don't think we say enough about Queen Vashti and the courage that she has to say no to the most powerful, at that time known king, most powerful known king in the world. She says, "No, I'm not coming. I'm not coming to be paraded in front of your drunk friends." And so we see that the crown is taken away from her. She is no longer queen. Mm-hmm. And then what happens? A decree goes out that they want a beauty pageant. The most beautiful women in the province would have been called to the city, right? And they would have been now at the king's disposal. And I think sometimes we have romanticized that. But you think about it, you're pulling these young ladies from these areas, from cities, from around the province, and so they would have been pulled from the areas that they would have known. They would have been pulled from their families, and really put into a harem, if you will, a stable. Yeah. Historians talk about that it could have been up to 400 women. Mm-hmm. And we talked about that the system in place would have been such where King Xerxes, in his selection process, would have had an opportunity at one night with each woman that he chose. And likely, any woman that was not selected would never come in his presence again. But they would not be sent back home. They would become his concubines. And so, just think of the harshness of that. And so that's chapter 2, and you kind of walk through that. But in the background of those possibly 400 women, where we see one Esther rise, right? Esther, her parents, we don't know exactly how they were killed or how they died, but we just know by the time we get to the story, it was Mordecai who was a cousin, right? Yeah. And he raised her as his own. Yeah. And we see that Esther already, we see her, the Lord's hand. One of the things we talk about in the book of Esther, we talk about the hiddenness of God. Right. Those that critique the book, they talk about that God is not mentioned. But clearly, as you read this, you see the hand of God in this. And you see his movements. You see how he allows some stuff and how he moves some stuff to keep what he promised in the book of Genesis, that his people would be preserved. And so you see Esther, you see her, you see some characteristics coming up. She was obedient. She was wise, she was courageous, you already see that. And the Lord's hand is up on her, and so she is ultimately selected out of all those women. And one thing in chapter 2 it talks about that Esther is in faith. All those that she comes in contact, even those that were in charge of the concubine, they saw something different in Esther. Yeah. Kind of reminds you of Joseph in the Genesis account, right? Even in the midst of that, he was in prison, and they said, "You know what? There's something different about you." You in prison, you're going to be in here for a while, but I tell you what, we're going to make you the lead prisoner.
Right.
And that's a good reminder for all of us. When God calls you, there should be some evidence.
Right.
There's a setting apart. Even in the midst of, we ain't talking about perfect situations right here, but even in the midst of these situations that are not perfect, we see that God's favor is moving. They have a saying out there. I didn't preach it, thought about it, but it's thought that favor is not fair. Mm-hmm. You hear folks say that, and it's not fair. And truth be told, we don't want God to be fair. We don't need that. Yeah, but certainly we see even now how God is positioning Esther and placing her right where He needs her to be to do His work. Don't tell me what God can't do. Even with us, even where we're at, sometimes we look at it and we think we may have aged past and stuff, or we think we're not as effective as we. God can use anybody at any time to do His work. It's ours to have a willing heart. You talk about age, Abraham and Sarah can tell you about age. And so that brings us, keep in mind the end of 2, we were introduced to Mordecai, right? Mordecai appears to have he's Jewish, but keep in mind the Jews, many of them have been absorbed now in the Persian culture. Keep that in mind.
Yeah.
And we've come to this point where Esther has not, and that was part of what Mordecai told her. He said, don't you tell anybody you're a Jew. All right? Mm-hmm. Keep that under wraps right now. And we're gonna see what the benefit of that. But Mordecai, we see his wisdom already coming through. He had a decent, what appears to be a decent government position. Because we find him right there at the King's Gate. And from our studies, we know that at the King's Gate is where many times where they make decisions, right? And Mordecai, we find him there. So it appears that he had some type of decent government position. But he was able to hear some stuff. The end of 2, he was able to hear about a plot against the king. And he got word to Esther and said, hey, I see how this may benefit us in the future. I want you to know there's 2 folks that the king thinks is on his team, but they're plotting to kill him.
Yeah.
And I want you to let the king know, and also let him know that I was the one that told you.
That's right.
And it tells us that it was recorded in the chronicles of the king. And so basically, in their records, they noted Mordecai was the one that snuffed out that possible assassination attempt. So that brings us to 3. It's not a whole lot, not a whole lot of reading. It's not a long chapter. So we'll have plenty of time to kind of walk through it. But I wanted, just because we've been 2 weeks away, I wanted to kind of set the scene and make sure we had that background. And just kind of brought that back to memory. 3, so this is the conspiracy, Haman's conspiracy against the Jews. After these things, King Ahasuerus promoted Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Haggagite, and advanced him and set his seat above all the princes who were with him. 2, and all the king's servants who were within the king's gate bowed and paid homage to Haman. For so the king had commanded concerning him. But Mordecai would not bow or pay homage. Then the king's servants who were within the king's gate said to Mordecai, why do you transgress the king's command? Now it happened when they spoke to him daily, and he would not listen to them, that they told it to Haman to see whether Mordecai's words would stand. For Mordecai had told them that he was a Jew. When Haman saw that Mordecai did not bow or pay him homage, Haman was filled with wrath, but he disdained to lay hands on Mordecai alone, for they told him of the people of Mordecai. Instead, Haman sought to destroy all the Jews who were throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus, the people of Mordecai.
So we see right here that Haman is an interesting. We spoke a little bit about Haman in our introduction. Now we're going to flesh out this Haman character. He's the son of Amminadab the Agagite, and he advanced him and set his seat above all the princes who were with him. And so this Haman character is going to be elevated to second in charge.
Yeah.
In the province, in the kingdom, and so he's almost like a prime minister position. So this is heavy, you all. But what I want to key in on, just so so we don't miss it. Look at that. He's an Agagite. Amminadab, the son of Amminadab, is an Agagite. And what we believe is that Haman is going to be a descendant of Agag.
Yeah.
And Agag was the king of the Amalekites. You know what I'm saying? Well, that sounds familiar, but help me out with that. Well, let's go back. If you look in Exodus, and I know you're saying Exodus, but we're going back to Exodus. But if you go into Exodus, Exodus 17, I'm not going to read all of it, but look, this is 17:1. Then all the congregation of the children of Israel set out on their journey from the wilderness of Sin. This is 1, according to the commandment of the Lord. So they're coming out of Egypt, you all. Exodus account, right, is going to document the Israelites coming out of Egypt. And if you jump over to 8, now Amalek came and fought with Israel in Rephidim. And Moses said to Joshua, choose us some men and go out and fight with Amalek. Tomorrow I will stand on the top of the hill with the rod of God in my hand. So Joshua did as Moses said to him and fought with Amalek. And Moses said to him, and Moses, Aaron, and Hur went up to the top of the hill. And so it was when Moses held up his hand, y'all remember this? That Israel prevailed. And when he let down his hand, Amalek prevailed. But Moses' hands became heavy, so they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it. And Aaron and Hur, right, supported his hands, one on one side and the other side, and his hands were steady until the going down of the sun. So Joshua defeated Amalek and his people with the edge of the sword. And so you've got the Amalekites who attacked the Israelites in a vulnerable time. They were just coming out of Egypt.
Yeah.
They were just coming, marching in the wilderness. And so you have the Amalekites who attacked them. God gave them strength to win that. Y'all remember that, right? And Aaron on one side and the hands. I don't think I've ever preached that. I may have to preach that. But you've got that. But as a result of the brashness, if you will, the arrogance of the Amalekites and how they dealt with the people of God, God is going to see to it that the Amalekites are dealt with.
Yeah.
And that they are annihilated as a result of that. Deuteronomy talks about that. It talks about how they even attacked the folks the rear. And so attack the weakest, the youngest, those that were sick. And God said, I'm going to deal with it. And then, I'm saying, we've got that. But then, if you recall, in Samuel, Saul, and this is going to be Agagite, Saul is told, well, let me read this. It's Psalm 15:1. I'm just going to read a bit of it. The Lord sent me to anoint you king over his people, over Israel. Now, therefore, heed the voice of the words of the Lord. Thus said the Lord of hosts, I will punish Amalek for what he did to Israel, how he ambushed him on the way when he came up from Egypt. Now go and attack Amalek and utterly destroy all that they have, and do not spare them, but kill both man and woman, infant, nursing child, ox, sheep, camel, and donkey. And then if you jump down to 7, and Saul attacked the Amalekites from Havilah all the way to Shur, which is east of Egypt. He also took Agag, king of the Amalekites, alive, and utterly destroyed all the people with the edge of the sword. But Saul and the people spared Agag and the best of the sheep, the oxen, the fatlings, the lambs, and all that was good, and were unwilling to utterly destroy them. Y'all remember that? Where Saul was disobedient?
Yeah.
That's where you get the passage that obedience is better than sacrifice. Because
Right.
Saul, once he was confronted by Samuel, he tried to say, you know what? I did a pretty decent job. I wasn't 100%, but it seemed like I still got an A. and then look, it was Samuel. That's a good preacher. I've never preached that. I don't like to preach that. It was Samuel the prophet that heard the voice of the sheep as he was coming up. He heard the sheep, all those sheep that he was supposed to destroy, Saul was supposed to destroy. He heard them in the background, and that alerted him to the fact that Saul didn't do what he was supposed to do. And ultimately, if you remember, look, Old Testament, some prophets don't have anything on the Old Testament. If you recall, Samuel the prophet ended up killing the king, Agag. Right? Y'all remember that? That's the end of 15. So ultimately, as a result of that, of course, we see Saul disobedient. But what we see now is because of that, there is strife between the Jews and the Amalekites, the descendants of the Amalekites.
Right.
So that's the background. So Haman and the Jews, they've got a feud. They like us a little bit. Some of us, we have feuds with families and other families and within our families, and they've been going on now for 50, 60 years. This has been going on for a little longer than that, but that's the background for right there. And so you've got this hate that they already have for one another. So that's why you're saying, what that Agagite, why is that important? That's important because it appears that Haman now is second in charge.
Yeah.
And so we see, and Haman, there's some interesting, we'll talk more about him in the next chapter as well. Haman has little man complex.
Mm.
He has to, everybody's got to bow to him at that gate. Y'all ever been at work and you got folks, some folks that don't have a supervisor position, they think that everybody's supervisor anyway. They think that everybody's supervisor anyway. They think everybody got to bow to them in some form or fashion.
I hear you, Doc.
And I know you all left it alone, but some of us that we've reminded some folks maybe in some not so kind language that they ain't my supervisor.
I hear you.
Not you all, I'm talking about the folks at the other church. But Haman said, look, and it does appear that even King Xerxes required that. He put him in charge, but it looks like Haman was the one that came up with this thing that, look, bow. I need y'all to bow.
Yeah.
And there's something wrong with leadership when they have to keep reminding you that they're leader.
Mm-hmm.
And they have to tell you to do certain stuff to make themselves feel well. Don't call me. I'm just saying what I'm saying. You're going to have to take it up with the book of Esther. But anytime, and look, I'm just saying what I'm saying. But anytime that you have to constantly build stuff and constantly demean others in hopes to lift yourself up, it's a problem.
That's right. You're talking right, Doc.
Tweet all you want to, but there's a problem. Real leadership. Look, Haman, it's obvious that not too many held Haman in high regard because he had to tell them.
Yeah.
He had to make them respect him.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say a bit about leadership on this Sunday, if be the Lord's will. But you got those that bow, but it said Mordecai would not bow. Let's walk on through this. And there's depending on your commentary, some say that he chose not to bow simply because of the rivalry between the Amalekites and the Jews.
Yeah. And
I think that's fair. But there's also some that say, and you can team that up with the fact that he said he was a Jew, that they say that at this point he chooses to be a devout Jew, if you will. He's pulling. What we see with these Jews in Persia, it does not appear. That's one critique for some. It does not appear when you think of like a Daniel. Daniel, although he was in foreign territory, he was devout.
Yeah.
And we don't see that on the surface with Esther and with Mordecai.
Right.
Or Mordecai. Some may say that. Now, I don't think we can read into that they don't believe in God. I'm not saying that. But we don't see the same dedication that bounces off the pages, at least from a devout Jew perspective. An Old Testament Jew would have seen. So I say that to say it doesn't appear, even in Persia, that they kept some of the festivals and they kept some of those traditions that would have been spearheaded by the Mosaic Law. But with that being said, it's merely conjecture. Some believe, Deuteronomy, this thought that should have no other gods before me. They think that Mordecai, uses that to say that that's why he won't bow. I don't know. We do know, and we got the notes in there. The notes, from a biblical perspective, it appears that paying homage to a political leader in a sign of respect, that was throughout Scripture. Genesis 18:2, 23:7, Exodus 18:7, 2 Samuel 16:4. And so paying respect to political leaders, it does not appear to be against biblical principles in and of itself. And so we don't know exactly the reason. I think both are fair, and maybe a mixture of it. For whatever, it could be that Haman, that Mordecai knows that Haman ain't worth a dime, period. And he just refuses. Whatever the reason, we know that Mordecai stands by what he sees as principle and refuses to bow. And just like, what they say, bad news travels fast.
Right.
Look, you can maybe it hadn't happened to y'all. You can be solid, have a great year, and toward the end of the year you mess up one thing, and then folks will remind you of it.
You're right.
Write it down and everything. Here you done had a great 11 months, and you slipped up, maybe the wrong memo was sent out or something, and that's what folks remember.
Right.
Well, right here, the folks said, look, Haman, Mordecai is refusing to bow. And so what are you going to do about that? When it gets to Haman, look at this. Now it happened when they spoke to him daily. They tried to convince him. They told it to Haman, see whether Mordecai's word would stand for. For Mordecai had told him that he was a Jew. When Haman saw that Mordecai did not bow or pay him homage, he was what? Haman was filled with wrath. But he disdained to lay his hands on Mordecai alone, for they told him of the people of Mordecai. And look, you talk about bad leadership. Still dealing with Mordecai alone. Look what this pride is going to call him to do. This pride and this anger. Instead, Haman sought to destroy all the Jews who were throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus, the people of Mordecai. And so now you got a situation where the prime minister, the second in charge, wants to destroy an entire people group.
Right.
And it ain't just this is the people of God.
Uh-huh.
And when you look throughout history, you all, of course, when we talk about Old Testament, we're talking about the Exodus account, where we see foreign powers that have attempted to take out. Look, they looked at, who was that, the Egyptians? They said the population. We let you go on over to Goshen and we let you do a little farming. And now we looked up, you done quadrupled your numbers. Y'all remember that? And they sought to deal with them, right? Even when you talk about Jesus, and we see that they were going to deal with Jesus, right? They sought to kill. You better be careful dealing with God's people. And we see Haman right here. When you talk about bad leadership, I'll say more about that Sunday as this thing unfolds. I believe the Lord wants me to touch on it. anytime you've got a leader that throws temper tantrums, you've got a problem.
Right.
And anytime you've got people, and you've got whole groups of people, and people next to he or she, that signs off on the temper tantrum, you've got a problem. Haman is throwing a temper tantrum, and he said, I'm gonna deal with the entire people group now. And so we see this anti-Semitism, and we've seen that throughout history. I heard one theologian, I've never heard it like this. He said from Haman to Hitler.
All right.
And he kept trying to deal with God's people, and God protected. And so we see this. Look, don't call me. I've got a lot going on. I got some other stuff I need to handle. Call me next week and we can talk about it. Anytime you've got leadership that goes after entire people groups, you got a problem. In the first month, which is the month of Nisan, this is 7. Nisan, in the 12th year of King Ahasuerus, they cast Pur, that is Lot, before Haman to determine the day and the month until it fell on the 12th month, which is the month of Adar. Then Haman said to King Ahasuerus, or King Xerxes, there is a certain people scattered and dispersed among the people in all the provinces of your kingdom. Their laws are different from all other peoples, and they do not keep the king's laws. Therefore, it is not fitting for the king to let them remain. If it pleases the king, let a decree be written that they be destroyed, and I will pay 10,000 talents of silver into the hands of those who do the work to bring it into the king's treasury. So the king took his signet ring from his hand, gave it to Haman, the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, the enemy of the Jews. And the king said to Haman, the money and the people are given to you to do with them as seems good to you. Then the king's scribes were called on the 13th day of the first month, and a decree was written according to all that Haman commanded. To the king's satraps, to the governors who were over each province, to the officials of all the people, to every province according to its script, and to every people in their language. In the name of King Ahasuerus, it was written and sealed with the king's signet ring, and the letters were sent by carriers into all the king's provinces, to destroy, to kill, and to annihilate all the Jews, both young and old, little children and women, in one day, on the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, and to plunder their possessions. A copy of the document was issued as law, and that's key, in every province being published for all people, that they should be ready for that day. The carriers went out, hastened by the king's command, and the decrees were proclaimed in Shushan the citadel. So the king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city of Shushan was perplexed. And so we see there's a lot in this. Let's just kind of walk through this, and we'll say a bit about it on Sunday if the Lord allows. And so what we've got, we've got this first month, this month of Nisan, which is going to be, this is the Persian calendar. It's going to line up with April or May or so for us. And it's the 12th year of King Ahasuerus. And they cast lots, so they cast Pur. Of course, Purim is going to come into play towards the end, you all, because that's the festival that they're going to, the Jews are going to now hold from this point on to recognize the deliverance that we find in the story of Esther. But they cast lot. Look at this. They cast lot to decide when they're going to do this, to deal with the people of Jewish descent. Then look what Haman does, and Lot. That's going to be like our dice. So almost it's a gamble, almost a gambling system, if you will. It's going to liken to our dice these days. But it's interesting in Proverbs 16 and 33, and we see that throughout Scripture, you all. We'll see that. The lot is cast into the lap, Proverbs 16 and 33. But it's every decision is from the Lord. And so even in the midst of this, we still see the Lord behind this, if you will. But the significance of this calendar is that we're getting ready to see that the king is going to sign off on the annihilation of the Jewish descendants. But because of the dice, he was rolling dice. Some even talk about that it was a lottery system, and they were using the money, if you will, to put back in the king's treasury. Whatever. All we know is it was some type of system, dice, or some type of gambling system, and it was determined that it would be 11 months later, and then they would deal with the Jews. And even in that, we're going to see the Lord move. They don't mention God specifically, but we see that God's in this. Even in that time frame, we're going to see God put some stuff in play that's going to allow for the preservation of the Jewish nation. Then Haman said to King Ahasuerus, there's a certain people. You better be careful. Look, there's a lot of folks, they come to you, or some folks come to you sometime, and they don't like giving the specifics, but they just throw something out. He didn't tell the king that it was the Jews. He said there's a certain people that you need to be concerned with. You ever had somebody around you and they say, well, they are talking about you. You're like, well, who's they? And you like, and they tell you, well, it's just they. They don't give you any names. Come to find out that they is them. And so it's Haman, you see, and it really speaks to the character even of Xerxes as well. He's very nonchalant when Haman comes to him and tells him that he wants to kill an entire people. Seems like the king would want to ask some questions, but he doesn't. He says, look, there's a certain people scattered and dispersed among the people in all the provinces of your kingdom. That tells us that the Jews are throughout the kingdom. Their laws are different from other people's, and they do not keep the king's laws. What we see in a lie, there's typically some truth in it, right? Same thing with Satan in the garden. It sounded good. If you weren't on point, it sounded all right because it had a little bit of truth in it. And finally, Satan said, are you sure that's what God said? Well, we see that Haman uses that principle right there. He says they're scattered and they follow their own laws, and you don't want that. They don't follow the king's laws. There's no evidence that they didn't follow the king's laws. Although they were a people set apart, we don't have any reason to believe that there were any revolts. That they were planning a revolt at this time. They had meshed themselves into Persian society.
Yeah.
But Haman lied, and look, there's some folks that like to lie on you. People, I didn't always believe this, but people want to be God many times. And so all you got to do is dress it up real nice, and they'll go right along with you. All right, and not checking for the sales or anything. He says this. He says, look, therefore it's not fitting for the king to let them remain. If it pleases the king, let a decree be written that they be destroyed. And I will pay 10,000 talents of silver. That 10,000 silver, all this silver right here, we believe it's the silver weighed about 300 tons. So that's, I will pay 10,000 talents of silver into the hands of those who do the work to bring it into the king's treasury. Keep in mind, we talked about it a couple of weeks ago, King Xerxes, one of the things that he did, he went to war with the Greeks, right? And he lost the campaign with the Greeks. One of my favorite movies, 300. Everybody seen that movie 300? Some of that comes from right here, when you've got the Persians and the Greeks in battle, Spartans and all that.
Look, that's a rough movie now. I didn't watch it on Sunday. I know it's rated R, but I didn't watch it on Sunday, all right? But it's a good movie. Just don't watch it before Sunday school. And so you've got this this money. So I say all that to say it looks like that Haman is willing to even bribe the king, and the king is going forward. Again, a king that doesn't research is a problem. It says the king took his signet ring from his hand and gave it to Haman, the son of the Hammedatha the Agagite, the enemy of the Jews. And the king said to Haman, the money and the people are given to you to do with them as seems good to you. That decree, that's where I want to go back to, and I'll pause even when I talk about the law and the decree. That decree, remember, once the king gives a decree like that, it can't be reversed. Remember, that's going to be key. That's going to be key when we get further into Esther. And then we see the king's scribes were called on the 13th day of the first month, and a decree was written according to all that Haman had commanded. To the king, to the satraps, to the governors, all who were over in each province, to the officials of all the people, to every province according to its script, and to every people in their language. And so they wrote that decree in the language. Remember, it's a large province, different languages. And so they wrote that law, they wrote that decree in the language so the people could hear it. Those that were in charge would understand it. And so you're just talking about what went into play to annihilate, to kill all the Jews that are in their area. Can you imagine that? And they say, look, we got a little time, but go ahead and prepare on this day to do it. In the name of King Ahasuerus, it was written and sealed with the king's signet ring. That signet ring, we talked about that before. That's that's like the signature of the king. And the letters were sent by the carriers into all the king's provinces to destroy, to kill, and to annihilate all the Jews, both young and old, little children and women, in one day, on the 13th day. Can you imagine? One day, on the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, and to plunder their possessions. So it's written in the law to kill them and to take all their goods. A copy of this was to be issued as law in every province, being published for all people, that they should be ready for that day. Something about that, that's evil. The couriers went out and hastened by the king's command. The decree was proclaimed in Shushan the citadel. So they said it right there in the city too. So the king, and we'll end it with this. Look at this. So the king and Haman sat down and drank, and the city of Shushan was perplexed. Haman, the king, every time he drinks, he makes bad decisions. Yeah, I remember when he drank, he was drunk with Vashti, right? When they talked to him into trying to parade his wife in front of everybody, and now he over here drinking again, making bad decisions to annihilate the people without research or anything. You've got to be careful with people that don't know how to make decisions for themselves. I'm scared to death of people that can't make a decision for themselves. Those folks are dangerous. You got folks that all people have to do is just wind them up, and they go do the bidding for the folks. Sometimes I look at folks and I'm saying to myself, they come over here mad or come over here raising you know what, and I'm thinking to myself, who sent you? That doesn't sound like you. Who sent you? I know Satan sent you, but who did Satan use to send you? And certainly we see this picture with Haman. We see that Satan sent him. But as we walk through this, go ahead and read. If you've not read those first couple of chapters, go ahead and read them anyway. They read quickly. Read those, but read up to 4 and 5, and then we'll tackle some of that on next week and the next few Wednesdays, if it be the Lord's will. But an interesting turn of events, if you will. You literally have it written in law, you all, to kill all the Jews. And let's see how the Lord's going to work through that.
Be praying, keep us in prayer, keep the church in prayer, be praying for one another. A lot going on in different directions. Take care of yourself. I know this is the first week of school in this area, and so get your vitamin C and all that. And certainly, if it be the Lord's will, we'll see and hear from many of you all on Sunday. Let's pray. God, again, we thank you just for an opportunity to study your word again. Thank you for this passage in Esther, as now we continue to see just the providential care of God. And even when it appears to be hidden, Father God, we find confidence in knowing that you're still working. And so, God, we thank you for that. We pray again a special blessing for all those that are amidst the bereavement, those that are in doctor's care even now. We pray for all families that are represented under the rooftop of Cedar Top. Continue to bless this church is our prayer. Bless those that are connected with us on this evening, Father God. Thank you for all that you're doing. Give strength